Every judgment or decision depends on information. We draw on memories, experiences, impressions, evidence, and feedback to decide what is true, what is likely, and what we should do. The challenge is that the information that influences us most strongly is not always the information that deserves the most weight. Some information is vivid, some arrives early, some becomes clear only after an outcome is known. Each of these can shape our judgment in ways that are difficult to notice. This is why one useful question in judgment and decision making is, what information am I relying on? This question asks us to examine the basis of our judgment before accepting the judgment itself. One important example is the availability heuristic. Availability occurs when people judge frequency, probability, or importance based on how easily examples come to mind. More technically, people may substitute an easier question, how easily can I think of examples, for a more difficult question, such as how common or likely is this event? This substitution can be useful. Events that occur more often may be easier to remember. But ease of recall is also affected by many things besides frequency. Vivid events, recent events, emotionally powerful events, and, in today's world, highly publicized events may come to mind easily, even when they're not especially common. As a result, a judgment may feel evidence-based, even when it's being shaped by memory accessibility. The issue is not that memory is irrelevant. The issue is that the ease of recall is an imperfect guide to probability or importance. A second example is anchoring and adjustment. When people make estimates, they often begin with an initial value, or an anchor, and then they adjust away from that anchor. The problem is that adjustment is often insufficient. Final judgments remain too close to the starting point, even when the anchor is incomplete, arbitrary, or only weakly relevant. Anchors can appear in many forms: a listed price, an initial offer, a first estimate, a comparison point, or an early impression. Once an anchor is present, later thinking may occur in relation to it. Additional information can matter, but it may not move the judgment far enough. This is why first impressions can be so persistent. An early impression can act like an anchor, shaping how later information is interpreted. Evidence that fits the initial impression may seem especially meaningful, while evidence that conflicts with it may receive less attention. A third example is hindsight bias. Once an outcome is known, people often see that outcome as having been more predictable than it actually was. The past begins to look more orderly, more understandable, and more inevitable than it seemed before the outcome occurred. Hindsight bias can influence both memory and explanation. People may misremember their earlier uncertainty. They may focus on details that appear to explain the known outcome, and they may discount other outcomes that seemed plausible initially. This can make it difficult to evaluate decisions fairly. A decision that was reasonable under uncertainty may look foolish after a bad outcome, while a weak decision process may look better after a lucky outcome. These processes also contribute to overconfidence. If memorable examples feel likely, anchors feel reasonable, and past outcomes feel predictable, people may become more confident in their judgments than the evidence warrants. These examples illustrate that judgments are shaped not only by the amount of information available, but also by which information receives attention, how that information is retrieved from memory, and when it enters the judgment process. Asking, what information am I relying on, helps bring these influences into view. It encourages us to consider whether our judgment is being shaped by a vivid example, an initial anchor, a first impression, or knowledge of how things turned out. It also encourages us to distinguish between evidence that's genuinely diagnostic and information that merely feels compelling because it's familiar, recent, emotional, or easy to explain after the fact. This question doesn't require us to reject intuition, but it does ask us to inspect the information that intuition may be using. When the information guiding a judgment is relevant, representative, and appropriately weighted, intuition may serve us well. When the information is vivid but unrepresentative, anchored to a weak starting point, or distorted by hindsight, a more deliberate process may be needed. The first step toward improving a judgment is often identifying the evidence, memories, and assumptions on which that judgment demands. When uncertainty is high, one question is often worth asking: what information am I relying on?